How we manage growth is always a big issue in local government. And I think a residential development has to take place in the right place at the right time and with a plan for infrastructure and services. What is the right place? The right place is generally in and around our municipalities and in our traditional growth areas. So for instance, I don't think Monrovia is a traditional growth area for dense development. It is a growth area where we've had some low density development, but it has not been an area where we've had high density development. We don't have a town there, for instance. And I think we have to pace that development with our ability to provide schools, to provide roads, to make sure we have public safety services. And we had a strong, adequate public facilities ordinance in place to do that when I was a commissioner. Those laws have been weakened over the last few years. We have allowed a buyout for schools. If schools are overcrowded, they can pay a school mitigation fee. I call it a pay-and-go fee until schools are at 120% of capacity. That school mitigation fee does not provide enough money to actually build the needed schools. So I call that school overcrowding on the installment plan. And there's been an analysis done that if all the development that has been approved and has been allowed to pay a mitigation fee, as that builds out over the next 20 or 25 years, that mitigation fee is only going to amount to about $52 million, which is only enough to pay for one middle school. And some active PTA folks just did a recent analysis, which I think the commissioners have seen, that show with all the recent development that's been approved that the county taxpayers will have to pick up about $110 million price tag for schools. And then you talk about roads, and certainly the big key issue in Monrovia has been Maryland 75. And the challenge there, there's multiple challenges there. That is a state highway or a state secondary road. The developers agreed to commit $24 million, but that primarily straightens out the dogleg intersection at 75 and 80. It doesn't approve the rest of the road. The rest of the road is going to cost between $260 million and $500 million. So the challenge, that road is not in area that the state defines as a priority funding area. The state says to the counties, you can define growth to happen wherever you want. You can make your own land use decisions. But these are the areas where we will cost share to provide schools and roads. And if you decide to develop outside those areas, figure out how you're going to pay for it, because we're not going to. So the majority of Maryland 75 is outside of a priority funding area. So the state says they're not going to pay for it. A recent letter to the county said they should have received more money from the developers. And so that is a big price tag that the county taxpayers are going to either have to pick up, or they're going to have a diminished quality of life with a much more congested road and a much longer wait in traffic. So I think we have to go back to having a strong, adequate public facilities ordinance. I think we have to make sure growth pays its way. And let me just say this, when you approve a development in a rural area, it's going to cost more. Just extending the water and sewer there is going to cost a tremendous amount of money. So sometimes when you hear, well, the developer's paying $40,000 a house, part of that is because they chose to build somewhere where it's probably not the best place to build. So that is, it's a complex issue. It's much more complicated than that. And I do think we need to have public processes that take into consideration the views of the existing residents so that their voices are heard. I've always believed on two basic principles. People have a right to know what their government is doing, and they have a right to have their voices heard in the public process. And there are a lot of people who are living in the Monrovia area who feel that their voice was not heard or heeded in that debate. So it's always controversial, but that's it in a nutshell.
Well, it's controversial. Is that it in a nutshell?
Well, no, it's a very, very complex issue. I mean, absolutely. I mean, where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with 75. How about
well, I like to start with smart growth, because that's really where the root of all your evil is. When you say smart growth, obviously you're saying that the plan that Paris Glendenning put in place, that was smart growth. I know it intimately because my dad was the one who put it in place and championed it. Okay, smart growth is about putting all the population in the dense areas, okay? And that's the way they want to grow. If you find me any urban area that votes Republican, please let me know. They create dense areas. They want that type of growth that way. They vote Democratic. Okay, that's a fact. Find it. Tell me any city around that doesn't vote Democrat that's dense area. Even if you go up there to Oakland or Cumberland, look at the registrations. So Paris Glendenning had this vision, smart growth. Everyone bought into it. Because what's your alternative? Dumb growth? I mean, there was no alternative. So everyone bought into it. Then we escalated it, went to this wonderful thing called Plan Maryland from Martin and Merrily, who basically said that they were going to try to stop all building on lots of less. It was on planned service. No more well and septic. Okay, so if you have lots, if you're next to an area that's projected to be planned service in the future, you can't do well and septic, because getting back to the Chesapeake Bay, that a home on well and septic pollutes the bay 10 times more than a home on planned service. You can read all this. This is another reason the whole Rural Coalition got founded, was on this whole thing with Plan Maryland and the way they pushed it. And that's what united us. So we're now here in Frederick. We can't grow the way we wanted to grow. Roy Stanley would have been happy to do 350 lots on well and septic. The state won't allow it. Okay, I went to the state. I went to our delegation, whether it was Delegate Afzali, Delegate Schultz, then Delegate Huff. Say, get Roy Stanley 300 to 350 lots on well and septic. He'd be happy to drop this. Now you got to remember, that area was in the growth area for decades. Decades. I mean, I've lived in this county my whole life. No one was excited about Urbana. Started in 1972 by Kiplinger. I remember when they built the expansion onto the elementary school. I went there. My mother was principal. Okay, so that area has been planned for growth, and it should have been growing the way that they've grown now in terms of 1 to 5 acre lots. Can't do it in the state of Maryland. Okay, not going to let you do it. If they do, you go get me a permit for 300 to 350 lots for Roy Stanley on well and septic, and I'll get him to scrap the whole plan today. You won't get the permits. It won't happen. That is not their vision of smart growth in Plan Maryland. So if you want to downzone Roy Stanley and take away his property rights, I'm fine, but compensate him. We shouldn't downzone people and take their 401 away from them, their bank account, and say, sorry, thanks for playing. We're going to take away everything you've invested, all your property rights, your savings, or your 401k with nothing. So I don't have a problem with downzoning, but you should compensate that fact. People forget to remember we had a $50 million lawsuit against us with Roy Stanley. If you remember in closed session, we could have settled it for how many units was it? I mean, you were there with me. We went and did motions. How many units could we have settled it for?
I have no idea.
Was it 600, 700? I mean, I'll gladly release the executive session minutes if we want to. We could have settled that for a lot less. We were there.
Well, what you should know is we won the lawsuit, so we didn't really have to settle it.
Did the lawyers recommend that we settle? They said that this...
Did we win the lawsuit at the lower court level?
The first step, but not...
It was, and then it was appealed, but we did win the lawsuit. So why should we negotiate a settlement on something that we won?
I would love for the Frederick News-Post to interview the attorney, and I'll gladly sign the waiver to release that. Because they said you got 2 lawsuits in the state of Maryland that's going to define estoppel zoning.
Do you hear that, Beth?
That...
All right.
I'm all for it. That
just go pull the record of the lawsuits, and you'll find out that the county won the lawsuit. So you hear Commissioner Young talk about settling a lawsuit that the county won, which I think is a very odd thing to talk about. I also don't think that land use planning is some kind of weird Democratic plot.
Absolutely.
So I've never really heard that before.
Look at any urban area. Do they vote Republican?
Let me ask the audience. Was that a convincing argument for you guys?
Do you think that...
What about the other side?
Very racist.
It's not very racist. It's true. It's not racist in any way, shape, or form. That is just... That comment doesn't even belong in here. You don't even know me to make a comment like that. So...
Well, I think we can comment generally on the strategy without you making it personal. Yeah. But it's an interesting comment. But, you know, we're talking about smart growth. I think it's been generally accepted. I mean, wasn't it sort of lauded by planning experts throughout the country as being sort of a viable method for...
But you went to the next level with Plan Maryland.
Right. Well, that is something different.
Well, it's the next step with smart growth.
Okay.
It's what they always wanted to implement, but no one would. And then then Martin O'Malley did it with executive order. So you talk about listening to folks. They had one quick hearing. He signed it the next, like 2 days later. I was there at that hearing that the Senate had. So the same committee my father sits on, the room was packed. One quick hearing, next day, executive order. It was passed. And that really redefined how we move forward with growth in this state. So when you get into the PFAs and all that, it all depends who's governor. You elect Larry Hogan, all that changes.
All right, before we get up to the state level, let's Jen.
Well, that's where it's dictated.
Well, the state of Maryland takes this position. They take a position that they have a right to decide where state dollars will be spent. So they basically map out areas in every county where they believe that growth should happen, and they say these are the areas we will cost share on water and sewer, roads, schools, and maybe a few other things. And so you can decide as a county elected official as to whether you want to approve growth within those areas where the state will cost share or not. That's really what the whole thing is about. And so to say that the state won't allow well and septic in a certain area depends on how the county has mapped its tier areas for well and septic. Another thing that the county gets to do, and then the state concurs with it or not. And so it's really a cooperative planning effort, so that if the states are going to pay for half of schools, or if you're going to impact a road like Maryland 75, that they have told you whether they're going to agree to pay for it or not. So when you made the decision for the Monrovia Town Center, you knew that the state was not going to kick into that road because they'd already said it was not a priority funding area. So I think there does have to be a partnership between, municipal, county, and state government to try to make sure that we have growth happen in such a way that we accommodate the population, we know more people are going to want to live here, that we address the legitimate concerns of the existing residents. It's all a balancing act, and we're really trying to balance legitimate competing needs and interests.
Good.
Karen and I purchased a home in Monrovia. I saw the comp plan. I said to Karen, growth is coming in this area. This is where people want to live. Look at Urbana. Look at the other areas with Lake Linganore. That is where people want to live. We need to admit that and plan for it. How many high schools did we build in that area? Urbana, Oakdale, Linganore. So we built all these beautiful high schools, and then all of a sudden we're saying we're not going to allow people to move here and come here. This is what we've planned to do. We've got over $300 million in high schools. Our newest high schools are sitting right there in that area. That's why, because that's where the growth was planned. Now, when I took office, Urbana Elementary was overcrowded before I took office. I didn't create that problem. I thought it was amusing that they're trying to blame Hillcrest on me when I was a junior in high school when it opened with 3 portables because my mother opened the school. She was infuriated. So now, what is in place? A real plan. We got developer money. Mark Matt and Tom Natelli, we're adding 300 new seats to the middle school to address that issue. We got a free school site from Tom Natelli for the elementary school. That's in our 6-year CIP, and we will deal with that issue. Hillcrest, we worked with the mayor. Instead of fighting the city with terrible municipal relations that we had before, we acquired a school site on the Hargett Farm. The new elementary school for the West End is in the 6-year CIP. We'll have there's a real solution. Both those schools were overcrowded. Blaine Young wasn't even around or even served as a commissioner. So I don't know how you can blame either one of those on me. I wasn't even an officer anywhere. One, I was a junior in high school.
I haven't heard anybody blame the fact that Hillcrest Elementary opened with portables, however many years ago that was when you were a junior in high school, on you. Well, I don't really know where that comes from.
Newspaper.
Okay.
Well, there was a story, and it was
okay. I'll let the newspaper defend that one.
That's just the way I read it.
I'll hand the mic to Geordie for that one. Okay,
that's your fault, Cliff.
I know, isn't it? No, I'm up here, so you might as well blame me. So you got into the mitigation fee a little bit. We got into funding development. So I don't know, Jan, you don't feel that the mitigation fee is actually bringing in enough dollars to pay for the development that we're going to be facing. So why don't we get into that just a little bit?
We actually know it isn't. And a great example, I mean, we actually have staff in Permitting and Development Review actually added up all the school mitigation fees that would be paid over the next 20, 25 years, and it added up to about $52 million. And right now, new middle school costs about $45 million, so you can figure in 20 years, that's about what that will buy. And we know we're going to need a lot more schools than one middle school. But I think a good example is this one. With the Jefferson Tech Park, which actually has about 825, 850 housing units in it. When I was a commissioner, to pass the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, the developer had to build an addition to Crestwood Middle School. And they signed a contract agreeing to do that, and it would cost about $8 million. Under the current administration, they have decided to change the APFO and allow the school mitigation fee. So they let the developer out of the $8 million addition, and they accepted less than $500,000 in school mitigation fees. So we're really not ahead there. We're really behind. So that's just one example.
All right,
so
well, let's have Blaine talk about that.
Well, there's an example that a project came to a standstill. Same thing in the city of Frederick when I served as an alderman. We heard this thing called Jobs Pathway with Monocacy Boulevard at a standstill because the developer couldn't build the bridge. So we came up with a TIF in a dynamic way with CSR Hydro Conduit to build the bridge and road. I don't think anyone would want that to go away. Look at all the economic development and jobs that created. Now, we thought we had the county's participation in that when we moved forward, but when the new administration took over, they withdrew the county's participation. Under the Hoke Board, we had the county understanding the economic development, the job creation there. So there sometimes you had all that land sitting there that was right.
Are you talking about the Jefferson Tech Park?
No, I'm talking about
addition?
TIFs and how they work, and then I'm going to move to Jefferson Tech Park. Okay. It's a prime example. It's about jobs. Jefferson Tech Park is something that's been talked about for a long, long time in this county. We talk about wanting jobs. We're talking about bringing big companies here. Well, you have to have those sites available and ready. Jefferson Tech Park was at a standstill for a very long time. So we came up with a creative way, much like Monocacy Boulevard, of creating a TIF to make sure that the infrastructure is put in place. We just talked about smart growth. To me, smart growth is actually having some residential where the jobs are. You don't want those folks having to drive 20 minutes. So you build the commercial component of it, you get the jobs there, and you make sure that the housing is close to it. In the old days, people lived next to the factory. Now we build a factory or the company, and they live a half an hour away. That's why we have our roads jammed. So there's a residential component to Jefferson Tech Park, like there's a residential component of a Monocacy Boulevard with the residential units, the apartments that are beside the golf course. So we wanted to get that project moving so we would be ripe as the economy starts going to bring some big companies here, okay? And a lot of things are under the way out there at Jefferson Tech Park with companies already looking to relocate here in Frederick County. You're talking about a Hyatt first-class hotel out there, talking about a Whole Foods getting ready to sign out there, where you've heard about grocery stores and things of that nature. So a lot of the infrastructure, we didn't give anything away. What we did, a TIF, tax increment funding, just like what we want to do. I haven't heard much about it because we want to do the same thing with the city of Frederick to build the hotel conference center. That's going to be done with a TIF also when we move forward. And we need that project for economic development. So TIFs, and the county's used them before with Toys R Us, MedImmune, other opportunities. Jefferson Tech Park is a tremendous opportunity to get a lot of jobs, small, medium, large, while at the same time making sure that the infrastructure is being put in. That's what you're seeing out there with all that road work. That's what's being paid.
Are we talking about school mitigation fees, or are we talking about TIFs? Because I think that was the question.
Well, I'll talk about school mitigation fee.
Right.
The school,
and then I'll talk about TIFs. How's that?
Well, sure.
Okay, fair enough.
Sure. I'm the only candidate up here that's paid an impact fee, by the way. Okay, I paid an impact fee. I built a new home, and I had to pay an impact fee. Not everybody here has paid an impact fee. There's some impact fees where people are paying now, you know, anywhere between $14,000 to $25,000 per unit. We can't at the same time talk about we want affordable housing for young folks to get started or our seniors to retire here and then turn around and have impact fees escalate all the way up to $25,000. But that's what we did. So if you do a single family unit, could be $14,000. If you fell at the elementary, the middle, and the high school, that's tacking on another $11,000. That doesn't include the property taxes that they would pay. The homes that we're building in Frederick County, if you go down like the Lansdale off Route 75, they got single families starting at $500,000. Those folks are paying a tax bill on their full assessed value. I can guarantee you there's not a lot of people paying a full assessed value on a home right now at $500,000. None of those numbers include income tax, by the way. That's one number that's been let out of the equation the whole way. So the school mitigation was to hopefully get the housing market jump-started. Any economist will tell you, so goes your housing market, so goes your economy. I don't want to be Allegheny County, where unemployment is close to double digits and kids graduate from high school and leave, and we sure don't want to be Montgomery County. The fact is, even when we put those tools in place, to date, we have built, this board has built less homes than the Gardner board to date. So politicians don't build homes. The economy does. People first have to want to come here. They got to have the ability to get the loan, and then there has to be the housing stock for somewhere for them to live.
All right, okay. Jan.
Okay, there was a lot of different topics in that speech. So let's go back to school mitigation fees. Basically, the idea was, well, let developers pay less than they were allowed to pay before. If schools are overcrowded, they don't have to build a new school. We'll let them out of the $8 million contract, let them pay $400,000, because we want to jumpstart housing construction. Yet, it didn't work, because as Commissioner Young just said, housing starts are still slower than they were during the term of the Gardner board. So what does this mean to you? It means we've signed contracts to allow housing to proceed without the adequate schools and without the adequate money to build the schools. So therefore, the taxpayers are going to pick up the tab to build the needed schools once that housing project moves forward. So the school mitigation fee did not jumpstart housing. It just let development to proceed when we knew the schools wouldn't be adequate, and now we don't have the money to build the schools. So it shifted that burden to the taxpayers. That's the bottom line of this. Now, let's talk about TIFs. Do most of you know what a TIF is? No. Okay. A TIF is called tax increment financing. And what it does is it allows the property taxes from a development to be used to pay for infrastructure. So if you have a piece of land and it's worth $100,000, it pays taxes $100,000. If you put a $100,000 house on it, it'll pay taxes at $200,000. So the increment is the tax on the difference between $100,000 and $200,000. So a TIF allows that incremental property tax between $100,000 and $200,000, or some portion of it, to be shifted to pay for infrastructure. So now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And the answer to that is, it depends. If it is a business development and you're giving, like we did it with Toys R Us years ago, and they're creating jobs, and you give them a 20% of the 20% of the incremental tax to create those jobs, it's probably a good deal. If you give 100% of that property tax away for 20 or 30 years for a residential development, it means you're giving your property tax away so that the county government will not have enough money to pay for educating the students that will come in that development, for providing public safety, or providing other essential services. And so for the first time during this board, they have done these TIF deals for residential development. Instead of requiring the developer to pay for the infrastructure, they've allowed them to use future property tax. This will undermine county budgets for the next 20 to 30 years, and we will not have enough money coming from these developments and property taxes into the general fund to pay for teachers, to pay for police, to pay for fire, to pay for health services, to pay for road maintenance, or to pay for anything else. And that's a huge problem. And I completely disagree with the use of shifting future property taxes to residential development. It is a bad deal for Frederick County taxpayers, and that's been done by the current board.
So you're making it sound like a TIF is kind of like a gamble, but I mean, would you agree?
Absolutely not. Neither did the stock analysts that looked at our portfolio, because we are upgraded. This is a prime example. We presented all this when we went to our bond rating agencies. If the bond rating agencies saw all this doom and gloom, they want to be upgrading it. They'd be downgrading us to a negative outlook. So the bond rating agencies saw all this. You know, the fact is that we are moving forward of looking at opportunities and making sure that the infrastructure in place. Ran an ad, A2, I think it was yesterday. We've got over $468 million in commitments of money that is going to come to the county for infrastructure, for schools, school sites, fire station sites, library. $468 million I mentioned is cash in the bank.
You have it in the bank right now?
What's that?
You have $486 million
well, as you
in the
know,
bank
when
right
you pull a building permit, that's when you pay.
So the answer is no.
Well, then they can't pull the building permit. I mean, that's the fact. They can't pull the building permit unless they pay. It's part of the agreement.
I think you've all been confused to think that development is now paying its way when it's not.
It is paying its way.
Absolutely
and there was an analyst that just did it. Lake Linganore, another TIF that we did there. The residents overwhelmingly came out and said, please, county, support this. Over 460-some emails from those folks that said, please, our infrastructure is failing, and this is the only way that we can get it fixed. Support this TIF so we can fix our infrastructure. Right. That was the word from the residents of Linganore. Over 460 emails.
I want to talk about the TIF for Lake Linganore.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you this last one, and then we're going to take
we'll take another question.
Okay, but I think you'll enjoy
the citizens in Lake Linganore sent emails in asking and supporting for the Meadow Road interchange to be completed. It's half an interchange now. But I don't think they understood what the financing mechanism was, and that their future property taxes were going to be going to pay for that. The developer's not paying for that. The taxpayers are paying for that. And I did read the entire analysis that was done by the underwriters for that. And these are some of the things they decided. All of the fire calls for Lake Linganore over the next 36 years will be responded to by volunteers. They're not responded to by volunteers now, so there was no impact to the county budget, so they could afford to give the money away for something else. And the list went on and on. There was going to be no impact on the court system, on the health department, on corrections, and it just went on. In fact, it's going to be a utopia because there's going to be no crime, there's going to be no mental health issues, there's going to be no aging impacts and no need for aging services, there's going to be nothing. And so, you know, saying that because the bond rating was upgraded, that everybody agreed with this, these bonds haven't even been sold yet. So that was not part of the real analysis of the bond rating. And we know the bond rating was just upgraded because the rating agency changed its criteria, and about 10 counties in Maryland had their ratings upgraded really automatically.
All right, okay, well, oh yeah, this is not the debate, I'm sorry. I forget this is not Tuesday night's forum where I was shouting at people not to applaud. But why don't we take a, thank you for stopping. I know we could have, Diana, very great question, it inspired a very good debate, I think we'll all agree,
well, it's
right?
It's very complex.
It is complex, and we could probably go on all evening, but we do want your questions to get asked. So we're going to ask Matt Subert. No, yeah, stay there, come back. To ask his question. Would you like a break? We can certainly take a break to get some water. No? Is everybody okay? Like I said, just get up, go get some food. You know, we'll be here.
That's what I was just going to get another cup of coffee.
Well, it's a wireless mic, Matt, so you could wander over if you want as you read.
Okay. Do you foresee a risk that the development projects, such as Monrovia Town Center, will go undersold and result in developer bankruptcy and houses put up for auction? What negative impact could that have on home values and real property tax revenue?
Well, speaking of risk, there you go. Blaine, why don't you fire us off on that one?
No. I mean, it won't happen here in Frederick County. Frederick County is a much desired county in the state of Maryland. We have people wanting to come here because of a quality of life, because of the schools, low crime, parks, open space. We're the largest landmass county, and you're going to have only wanting more people to come. The reason why we have more people now here versus those that are born and raised here is because of the quality of life we have. And you talk about utopia, that's the utopia we have. People know that Frederick County is one of the best, if not the best county in the state of Maryland, and that's why, well, people are moving here. All you got to do is look at the numbers, and they'll want to continue to come here. So I don't have any concern about that any way, shape, or form, and I have an investment in that area also.
Well, I know I do too, but I mean, he was talking specifically, I think, about new home building and the potential, for perhaps a bubble burst like we've just been through, where a lot of construction just stopped. I mean, is that not a concern?
The only concern is, again, if the federal government tries to inject itself the way it did in the housing market. That's where the bubble really bursted. We put people in homes that couldn't afford them, that were on these ARMs, no down payments. Some of them you could get in 110% with no money down. They actually gave you money to furnish it. So, that was an issue at the federal government level, because we do try to instill and create home ownership. But I'm hoping that we're past that. I know that there was a concern about a second wave of a bubble bursting. But, again, if the federal government stays out of the way and doesn't try to inject themselves into making, citizens become home ownership under any cost. I mean, that's really what caused the issues there. We're lucky because of the region we're in, and we were immune from that. We'll continue to be immune to that, being in that D.C., Baltimore region.
Jan?
I think the answer is maybe, and I don't think we know for sure. What we do know is that we now have a pipeline of housing that exceeds our 20-year projected population demand, so that we have more housing approved than there's going to be a demand for housing based on population projections from the Maryland Department of Planning, which they get through the U.S. Census, and they've been pretty accurate over the years, with the exception of this most recent housing recession. And I think what's interesting is when you try to look in the future and you try to do visioning, is to look at the changing demographics that are going to happen here in Frederick County and in the state and in the country. And the Chamber of Commerce recently had a presentation about this, which really was very interesting. And it said that in Frederick County, we are going to age twice the rate of the state of Maryland and twice the rate of the United States. And the reason why is because when the county grew rapidly in the 80s and 90s, the demographic that moved here was families in their 30s, 30 to 50, having kids, and that same group of people is going to age up together. So that's why our population is going to age at twice the rate of the state of Maryland and the country. And of course, we're all going to age have an aging demographic as the baby boomers reach retirement age. So that's one issue. What will that group of people want to do? Will they want to downsize? Will they want a smaller house than they have? And that's probably likely that people are going to want to do that. And then the other question is, we have to keep our youngest generation, our millennial generation, living here. And to keep them here, they have to have jobs. And we know the millennials don't want to commute. They don't want to commute down the road like their parents did. They want to live more urban. They want to live in a more walkable community. So will they want to buy a house in Monrovia, in suburbia, like their parents did? And the answer appears to be no. So how does our planning fit with that? So I think since we've locked these developments down in these contracts for 20 or 30 years, we've set ourselves up for an issue, because we're going to lack the flexibility to adjust to these housing market demands unless we reopen and renegotiate all these contracts. And that's what I think we're going to end up doing. And I think that's a challenge, because we have overzoned.
Right, so we're talking about developers' rights and responsibilities agreements, which is a way of locking in, I guess. It provides an amount of stability for the developer, but it also doesn't it tie the hands of government for too long?
And by the way, my assessment went up in that area, so I guess the state didn't forecast it in that area, because the assessment of mine went up in that area. No, a development rights and responsibilities agreement is just that. It gives the developer predictability and stability, but with it comes rights, but also responsibilities. If the responsibilities aren't fulfilled, then they stop dead in their tracks. So it's a protection not only for the citizens, but it also gives the rights to the developers. But if they do not fulfill their commitments, then they lose their rights. So they have responsibilities.
But Jan made two interesting points. One was millennials, who will probably want to move downtown, and I think we're already seeing that.
Or maybe Monrovia, because half that development is age restricted.
maybe they can incorporate.
But I would think they might want to stay around their family in that area.
Well, they might. I know we're talking about sort of what-ifs here. But also seniors, which is a demographic that we can predict is coming, and the population will double by 2030. And I know certainly this is a question we had on Tuesday that went to the county council, but I'm interested to know your perspective on this wave of the aging population that's coming here and how we accommodate them.
Sure. Well, first, the number one priority when elected was to initiate a real senior property tax credit. Before, the tax credit was a lien, it was a deferral. So, and we didn't have anyone apply for it because who wants a lien on their property? So we put a real senior property tax credit in place. Household income started at $60,000. We've raised it to $70,000. If elected, I plan to raise that all the way to $100,000 in my first term. We also need to look at assets because it's capped at $250,000 worth of assets. When I talk to seniors, it's the number one thing they ask about is tax relief. I hear many of them. My mother, if it wasn't for the fact that her 4 sons are here and all her grandchildren are here, she would go probably maybe to Pennsylvania right over the border and not have her pension taxed, or Delaware, or maybe even farther away. So first is tax relief for our seniors. Second is having services in place. We just did a study, we funded, Department of Aging, and the new term you're now going to hear is aging in place. And we need to be prepared for those that want to age in place. So we're working with the Department of Aging to make sure that those services are also in place as we move forward. So you got to combat it several ways. Now, the state of Maryland needs to, and actually, you know, I said something to my father the other day because it was one of the issues that he actually ran on last time around, was giving seniors some tax relief about being taxed on their pensions. The state needs to address that also. Frederick County, I want Frederick County to be the most senior-friendly county they are. We talk about the base. Half of that development in Monrovia is age-restricted. So they're going to, half your tax bill, if you get your tax bill, and I have mine here, 50% of it goes to education. So half that development in Monrovia is age restricted. So all those folks will be footing a full tax bill with half of it going to education without generating any kids into the system. So we want to be senior friendly. They're not only good for the economy, for me, I think they're also good for the tax base because, again, 50% of your tax bill goes to education.
All right, Jan, did you have any further points you would like to make on aging seniors?
Sure. I think the discussion was how are we planning for that and our senior population. And of course, the senior property tax credit is just one piece of it. About 700 people, I think, have used the senior property tax credit. And in prior boards, we had added an expansion to the homeowner's tax credit, which was very similar to what is in place with the senior tax credit. I think that we have to take that needs assessment and do the next step. And we haven't done the next step. And the federal government paid for that needs assessment. So I think we need to empower our Commission on Aging, and I think we first have to fill the vacant positions on that Commission for Aging. And then we have to empower that Commission for Aging to move forward with creating an action plan and recommendations to address the needs identified in the needs assessment for the aging of Frederick County. And we need to make sure that the county health officer can review senior health needs and include that, and that we can fund the most pressing problem, which is the adult evaluation and review services through the AIRS program in the health department. Most counties provide funding for that. It is a state program, and we don't do that here. So we really are turning people away who need to have an evaluation of what kind of services they need to stay in their home. We also have a waiting list for Meals on Wheels. Funds for Meals on Wheels have been cut. So we have people, particularly in the Middletown Valley, who are going without nutrition, who need it. And I do also have disagreed with the plans the counties had to sell Citizens in Montague. I think that has been a failure in terms of keeping our promise to our seniors. So I think we have to have a transportation plan, whether it's more paratransit or transit for seniors, and we have to have more support services for our seniors to stay in their home. And I also think we have to look at our seniors as an opportunity. We have many people retiring here who are very healthy and active seniors, who have years of experience, knowledge, and wisdom, who can volunteer and really be productive contributors to our community. They also have a lot of wealth, and we want to make sure they stay here, spend their money, invest in our community.
I'm going to let Blaine finish out his point because we broke just before you got a chance to.
And I'm glad that I heard it here again tonight because I asked Bethany to look into it. The assumption that the county cut Meals on Wheels in any way, shape, or form is just plain false. I checked today. I'm on the board of Friends of Meals on Wheels. I've helped them raise them close to $50,000 personally from the private sector. So Meals on Wheels is very dear to me. I'm a volunteer and I deliver Meals on Wheels. So to say that, and I've heard it a couple of times now, has been very, very upsetting and troubling to me. So once I talked to the county today, there was a reduction of $4,568 out of a budget of $100,002. It was due to sequestration at the federal funding level. The state restored some funding. This is not Meals on Wheels. No meals were missed by anyone. Please call Carolyn True or Pat Rosensteel to confirm this, Bethany. But to sit there and say that, we've actually expanded some opportunities. Again, when Gail Wingate came to me, I roll up my sleeves many times in this community to raise money for various charities. When Gail Wingate said, we need some help, we need some money to help with Meals on Wheels, to buy meals, I said, absolutely, I'll serve on the board. So I'm on the board of Friends of Meals on Wheels, and to date, like I said, I've helped them personally raise over $50,000 to buy food for Meals on Wheels, and I personally volunteer delivering Meals on Wheels. So I know a lot of things get flying around during election time, and I do have a very thick skin, but that one hurt because I am very much involved with Meals on Wheels, not only raising money and personally delivering meals to seniors. So at some point, I'd like that retracted because that is just completely false. And again, you can call Carolyn True at the county that oversees the program.
Okay, I just want to say that that information did come from the county staff, and so you know, I'm happy to have it verified. And I also did talk to the mayor of Middletown, who did seem to confirm that Meals on Wheels were not, the demand was not being met there, and that there was an issue with getting a transportation for the meals to Middletown. So I'll certainly stand corrected on that, but I did base that on information I've been given.
Meals on Wheels, we are trying to expand to the Middletown area. That is why I've joined that board and trying to raise $250,000 to completely eliminate that waiting list.
Okay, so there is a waiting list in Middletown. There are people not being served.
There's a waiting list in total. Yes, there's always been a waiting list. Even when you were a county commissioner, there was a waiting list.
All right, how about we leave it there and we'll take another question, unless anybody wants to investigate the Meals on Wheels question, but we'll get that verified. I think we've had some promises on the table to get that clarified. Okay, I unfortunately tore that one a little bit, but another interesting question there, and that is for Mr. Jacobs. That's my fault. I stuffed it in my pocket because I was hungry. Yeah, the fishbowl's still a little wet, so, you know, it tore a little bit more easily.
Why do you think the county needs or does not need so much new housing? And why is there so little affordable housing offered in these new developments?
Interesting question. So, Blaine, you're sitting on the board right now. Let's talk affordable housing.
We have to plan, and that's what we're doing. We're planning for the future, okay? And my vision is to make sure that we have housing for our young folks to be able to get started here. Unlike my brother who had to get started in Washington County, now we've got him back in Frederick County. My entire family lives in Frederick County. We need to make sure that there's affordable housing for the middle class and affordable housing for the seniors so they can retire with dignity. Right now, we've been planning. Now, why are we dealing with a rush on development? Because of the previous assault on property rights. The downzonings that happened, I mean, I can make a whole list of them, from the ones that started on Route 15 of changing RC from 5 acres to 1 lot to 25 acres to 1 lot. I do not subscribe this whole notion that we talked about again, smart growth in Planned Maryland, where everyone lives on a postage stamp or lives in all these multi-dwelling units, okay? I like to see 1 to 5 acre development in Frederick County. That's the way I think we should move forward. But there is areas that we should have density in the multi-dwelling units, and that's in and around our municipalities, especially in the city of Frederick, where the services are. So when you look at our residential permits of what we have done, we're actually having less homes built under my administration versus the Gardner administration. We are planning for the future. Everything that is planned has been in the comp plan, some of it for decades. Our comp plan still is 80-20. 80% open space, agricultural, RC, protected lands, as we have places like the Catoctin Mountains, we have Camp David and things of that area. The 20% is what's been planned for decades. And again, they are the only areas that are coming forward. The only property that I know that was not a growth area that was brought in, and again, this is one that Commissioner David Gray even voted for, when J.R. Ramsburg brought in development down there off of, I forget the road in the Urbana area, where he wanted to do some Broderick Road, which I thought was opposed to. And then when David Gray said, I'm for it, I thought, well, okay, maybe this isn't too bad. I regret that vote, and I should have went with my gut. But that was the only area, and that's about 50 total lots, ballpark, that is planned outside of what's been projected and what had been planned for in the comp plan for decades. Again, if we want to downzone those people, then you should compensate them. You should not take affordable housing. We need to partner with Habitat. Very simple. Moderate price dwelling units. Working with Ron Kramer. Habitat can do it better than anyone. They know where the affordable housing is needed. They already know where the clients are, and that is where we get the money from the moderately priced dwelling units for the affordable housing.
Right,
otherwise,
okay.
you can't, again, you're asking for the government to start dictating the housing market. That's what got us in trouble. It's a supply and demand industry. Right now, you can buy a home more affordable than any time ever in history if you've got the cash to put down for a down payment.
All right, hang on. Before we get
Depends where you want to live.
Before we get back into back and forth with, you can do this afterwards, okay? But we'll welcome questions as long as you put up your hands, okay? We'll do that in just a second, but I think Jan wants to probably answer a few points here.
Yes, there was a lot of wandering around on different topics there. So the question was about affordable housing and moderately priced housing. During my second term in office, which would have been from 2002 to 2006, recognizing that we needed to have moderately priced housing in our community so that our teachers and our firefighters and our police and our retail workers and other people could live in this community, not be priced out, we passed a moderately priced dwelling unit ordinance called an MPDU ordinance. And we spent about 2 years crafting that with input from all the stakeholders. And the idea was that each development would have about 12.5% of the housing fall into a moderately priced range, and there was a definition for that. And the idea was that we wanted to have people of different economic levels living in the same neighborhood, and we want to make sure people could afford to live here who had all kinds of different situations in terms of employment. So the first neighborhood with MPDUs was actually built before I left office in 2010, because of course it only happened with developments that were approved after the ordinance was passed. And with the income of the Young Board, they decided to not require the moderately priced dwelling units to be included in development anymore. And the idea was that these homes would look the same as every other home, but the finishes would be less expensive. So instead of having granite countertops, they might have they might have something less expensive. They might have linoleum floors instead of hardwood floors and carpet, and they would just have lesser finishes, but the outsides of the houses would look basically the same. And a lot of the moderately priced dwelling units were likely to be townhouses and condominiums or apartments. So the Young Board changed this to allow a fee in lieu instead of building the houses. And every developer since then has taken the fee in lieu. And all of the developer rights and responsibilities have tied down that fee in lieu option for the next 20 or 30 years for those developments, which means we aren't going to have moderately priced dwelling units in all the developments that have been approved over the last couple of years, which is a significant pipeline of housing. So that's a problem. I think sometimes you have to have a fee in lieu, and that it's good to use some of that money for partnerships with land trusts and with affordable housing housing groups like Habitat, and Habitat does a great job, but in the last 20 years they've built about 25 houses, and that really doesn't meet the demand for that affordable housing. So I think we have to go back to requiring some of these homes to be built as part of, certainly as part of the larger developments that are out there, so that we make sure we have housing for everyone. And there's been discussion about the senior property tax credit up here, but I've talked to some of the members of our delegation, some of the candidates running for our delegation, and they have talked also about making sure we have affordable rental properties and making sure that maybe we have some tax credits so that we can have affordable housing in rental property as well. Because I know if you want to live in the downtown area of the city of Frederick, the rents are very high. And that is certainly where the jobs are and certainly where we want some people to live.
Right. Great. Well, I think I saw a hand up right at the front here.
Well, you talk. Good.
Well, let's take a question
Sure.
from the audience. This is about them. Go ahead.
Hi. I moved here about 3 years ago or so from Pennsylvania. So when I was looking for places to live for my family, we looked north because we couldn't afford to live in Montgomery County, and Frederick was a place we needed to stay. And we're in the Italian development in the VOU. It's quite a nice place. When we came to look at some of the schools, all the neighbors said, hey, take a look at UES. It's a wonderful place. We've come to realize that many of the schools in that area are over capacity. Centerville's 140% over capacity. I think it's got about 16 to 18 portables behind it. Similarly, the UES has about 16 portables behind that. I understand from PTA meetings at UES, the school is looking to renovate that school, and I'm talking about UES.
Right.
And,
so what's the question? Let's get to the question, because
okay.
I know we are pressed for time this evening.
Well, and Sugarloaf is another school that's going to alleviate some of that. When I asked Elizabeth Pussert, I may be messing the name up, she said that there are other schools that are first in line, so you're going to have to wait a while. And the idea of waiting a while where we live seems, you know, we have school, our kids will be finished by the time things happen. Not to mention that we only have one high school there that's getting a lot of positive play, and this is high schools and good schools are what make businesses locate to the area. So why wouldn't you want to put the effort into focusing on those schools? Doesn't matter what your party view is, the politics should go out the window and you should focus on what it is for the constituents. That's really how I talk about it. When I talk about my neighbors, I say, what do you like and what do you need for your family, your business?
Okay, I'll tell you what, how about we wrap that up?
So is your question about school funding in that area, is that basically what I hear, the capital improvements to the schools in that area?
School construction funding?
Sure, okay.
That's a good area to talk about.
I'll answer it, but I do want to talk about is, when we do talk about affordable housing, I always would like to see somebody identified, because I can show you where you can get a 2-bedroom condo for about $80,000 here. I can show you where you can get a townhome for $150 to $175. I'll show you where you get a single family for $250, $275. So just pick up the paper. It's actually in the Frederick News-Post. You can get it daily. So I wish we'd define what we mean by affordable housing, because there's a lot of housing stock that's available right now in those price range, which I think are very affordable. For the Urbana area, yes, it should be a high priority. That whole region should be a high priority. That is, besides the city of Frederick, in and around it, that area is where the growth is going to happen. We knew that. We've known that. That school overcrowding that's happened at Urbana Elementary has happened way too long. It was there before I became a commissioner, but we do have a plan in place to start easing that. Number one is an addition of 300 seats to start to move forward for the middle school. I know you care about the elementary school. We have worked to acquire land from Tom Natelli to build the new Sugarloaf Elementary School also. We also got land from Lansdale from another elementary school in that area. Lands from the Monrovia Town Center. There will be another high school in that area 20 to 30 years. Again, where have all of our new high schools been built? In that region. Why was that done? Because the county leaders then knew that the growth would happen in that Linganore region over to Urbana with Oakdale, the renovation of Linganore, and Urbana. So we have a plan in place. Our school capacity numbers are lower than the previous board. Currently, system-wide, we're at 88%. Our CIP still maintains that our system-wide capacity stay under 90% with our 6-year CIP. We do have to deal with a brand new Frederick High School in the city of Frederick. Those folks have waited for a very long time, and that school desperately needs to be renovated. That is a priority, and I do believe it's also a priority of Jan's, and that's in our CIP. There are areas that we agree on when it comes to doing the schools. Her board was very aggressive with school construction. Our board has been very aggressive with school construction. So schools are a priority, I believe, with both of us. We'd have different approaches, different philosophies, but I believe we both want the same thing. We just have different paths of how we're going to get the money to get to that goal.
All right, Jan, did you want to contribute an answer to that?
Well, schools have been, we've been in a little bit catch-up game in Urbana for quite a while. And I think it's a good example of where we had a development that was approved a long time ago, really in the 70s, long before either one of us was in public office, without an adequate public facilities ordinance. And so part of it has been subject to that, and part of it hasn't been. So when I was there, we built the Centerville Elementary School, which relieved overcrowding for a while. We also built the addition to the high school, and we built the middle school with one floor basically unfinished. And that's now the county is going to go in there with some developer money and finish that out so that they'll meet that middle school seat. So we need to build another middle school another elementary school in that area. And we need to see what we can do to try to accelerate the entire program so that we can not necessarily change the order, because we need a new school up in the West Frederick City area. We need the renovation of Frederick High School, and then we need Urbana. But here's what we should do, is we shouldn't have an APFO where we've made this exception for this school mitigation fee, because what that does is it creates a demand for new schools elsewhere, and it just ends up creating a bigger queue without the money to cure the problem. And so we seem to have a challenge of, we kind of catch up and then we decide we're going to weaken our laws and kind of recreate the problem. We go back and forth a little bit, and that's a huge issue. We need to stay the course.
But then you're going to have to deal with aging schools. I mean, all those that build any homes in that Thurmont-Emmitsburg region, we just take their impact fees and go somewhere else to build the schools.
Well, that's not true. We built new schools in Thurmont and Emmitsburg, too. I'm
talking about right now.
We built the primary school there. We built the middle school addition there. We built a high school addition there when I was in office. So
I'm talking about going forward. Where's the renovation to Contocton?
It's done.
I think if you talk to some folks up there, they think it needs to be done.
All right, so good question there. Right, okay, so we are now zooming past the 8:30 hour. So I know you guys want to ask questions. I understand. Unfortunately, I shouldn't have opened that door, really. We are going to take one more question from people who have already submitted questions. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to closing statements. And if you would, let's keep it as pithy as possible. Irene Dimitrov.
Just gonna open up a lot.
Why are we paying so much money to the current operators of Citizens Nursing Home?
Sure. Well, the first year is we're paying for the first 2 years. It's a $10 million contract that runs 4 years. By the way, everybody, the facility is the same. It's being run by a private company. There's not one person being transferred or asked to leave. Under actually Maryland code, if you're in any nursing home, Buckingham's Choice or Cumberland Farms, and you run out of money, under Maryland law, they cannot discharge you. So you can't discharge someone from any nursing home in the state of Maryland if you run out of money. So everyone in Montague is still there. They're not being transferred. They're being cared for. They're being taken care of. We're one of the last counties, except for Wycomico County, that has a nursing home, and they have a completely different model. We've lost over $50 million since the year 2000. Everyone keeps saying that you can make it sustainable. There's never been and I still challenge my opponent to produce any financial analysis that was ever done by an independent company that said that the facility could be self-sustaining. There was only one company that actually came in and said they could do something, and my father represented one time with Erickson that wanted to build an assisted living facility in Urbana that would help run the nursing home, but the county didn't want to have that conversation, and you can confirm that with my father if you would like. I don't believe the nursing home business is a responsibility of the county government. I believe schools, roads, fire and rescue, police, parks, that is why people pay their property taxes. So the facility's still going to be there. It's still going to be there in 100 years, and people talk about the deed. And the deed, we bought that property. The property was not donated. The taxpayers of Frederick County bought that property at market rate. It says for the poor. They take Medicare. The poor are being served there. If you want to say we violated the deed, well, you know what? We already violated it if you want to look at it from perspective. Animal control is there. Transit is there. Highway operations is there. There's many county facilities that are already there on that very land that the taxpayers purchased. So again, you know, there's a better way of doing it, and that's working with the private sector. You know, it's kind of like Obamacare. They said you could keep your doctors. Well, that's not true, and I tell you right now that you can never make that facility sustainable if it's run by the government.
Jan.
I hardly know where to start. The question was, why are we spending more money on to have Aurora Holding run the facilities than it would cost if we did it ourselves? And the answer is because we signed a bad deal. Okay, we're paying $7.3 million in this current budget year when it would have cost us $2.9 million to operate it ourselves. So when I hear that we spent $50 million since the year 2000 to operating the nursing homes, well, we're spending $7 million now. So multiply that by 10 or 14 years, and you can see it's a more expensive deal. And we're no longer taking any indigent elderly into Montague. So we have empty beds there. So we're literally paying someone to take care of a patient count that doesn't exist. And that's a bad deal for taxpayers as well. And it's also certainly a bad deal for the people who we are not serving. So I think the whole lease sale of Citizens in Montague was a bad financial deal for Frederick County. Whether you think we should be in the nursing home business or not, the sale was at less than what we paid for it. The buildings were built at $38 million. The sale price was $30 million. Then we threw in 7.5 acres of land for free. And then we threw in $5 million of cash accounts receivable or cash for free. And then we threw in a parking lot for free. So it's a big loss to the taxpayers. And when that went to court, the commissioners were so determined to try to pass off Citizens in Montague when they couldn't make the sale work because the deed was held up in court and the subdivision was held up in court. They did a long-term lease. That's a bad deal for Frederick County taxpayers. And so we'll see what the courts decide in January in terms of whether that lease also subverts the deed or restrictions or not. But I think it's just been a bad deal for taxpayers, and I do think it has violated our promise to the Bruner family, and I think it's violated our promise to our senior citizens.
Right. I tell you what, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, okay?
Sure.
And then, Jan, I'll give you another 30 seconds, then we'll go on to some closing statements.
The fact is, we could have gotten $40 to $45 million for the sale if we didn't care about the patients and we didn't care about the employees. But we did. And we put in there that the patients had to be taken care of and they couldn't be transferred. We put in there that the employees had to maintain their employment at their current pay rate. They could not be reduced. If someone was making 50, you couldn't say all of a sudden now you're making 40. So we put all those stipulations in there. We also looked at patient care. So actually, Aurora wasn't even the highest bidder. There was a higher bidder that had bad patient care numbers. So we protected the employees, we protected the patients, and we made sure patient care was in place. We could have gotten a lot more. We didn't go for the bucks. We wanted to make sure that we listened to the community. And again, it's a 4-year deal for $10 million. The $7 million that she's talking, we're paying 2 years up front and 1 year. You can pull the contract, 10 years, 4 years, $2.5 million, and we were losing, again, $5 to $6 million a year. We had all kinds of receivables that we couldn't collect, didn't know how to collect. And believe me, because no one would pay them. The government's not going to foreclose on people's houses if they don't pay their bills.
All right.
And believe me, they were relatives of some very well-known people in this community that their relatives refused to pay the bills.
I've given you a whole 1 minute and 10 seconds there. That was a long 30 seconds.
Sorry. I apologize.
So, Jan, why didn't you
see the red light?
There you go. I should have held it up.
Yeah, I'll just repeat that it's a bad deal for the taxpayers, and we're not taking care of people. And I think it's a real problem that we have empty beds there that we're paying for. And if you talk to some of the employees that are still there, and many of them have left, it is not a good work environment. And I've certainly had some employees say that we're really not taking care of people anymore. And I think it's a sad state of affairs.
All right, 22 seconds. That was pretty good, I think, wasn't it, for wrapping up? So, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we give them a round of applause for taking our questions from whichever political perspective you are from. And what we'll do is we will give you 2 minutes to wrap up, some closing statements if you wish. You don't have to take the whole thing. And Jan, you can go ahead and go first.
Okay, thank you all for being here and for being interested voters. I'm running for county executive to fight for the things we care about and we love here in Frederick County. Personally, I served as a county commissioner for 12 years, and I consider Frederick County to be my family. I'm very invested in it, and I'm running to fight for it. Over the past 4 years, I've watched in dismay the many actions that have happened, including the dumping of Head Start, the zeroing out of our funding to our human service nonprofit agencies, ending a many-decade-year partnership, funding education at the bare minimum required by law, basically turning over the keys to managing growth to the development community. I really disagree with the $160 million taxpayer giveaway, the future property taxes that we're giving away to 2 large residential developments. And I disagree with the plans that have really been locked in place to re-overcrowd our schools and to congest our roads. And I disagree with the repeal of the ethics law, the privatization, the mistreatment of county employees, and the fact that really the public is not able to participate in the public process and be treated with dignity and respect. So I am running for office to try to turn the tide and address all of these issues. I want to make sure that Frederick County remains a great place for us to live, work, and raise a family. I want to make sure we have good schools. I want to make sure we have honest government, and I want to make sure we manage growth responsibly. I am running against a candidate who has an unprecedented amount of money, an unprecedented amount of special interest money, and I am running against a campaign that is really, it's a smear campaign. If you're getting the mail, you know that each and every day you get something that talks about me, and most of it, in fact, really all of it, is basically wrong. But I'm going to stand steadfast and fight for Frederick County, and I'm asking you to stand with me and to vote for me for county executive on November 4th.
Thank you. Just all right, 10 seconds. Well, you still had about 30 seconds at the Tuesday debate, so we'll... All right, Blaine, by all means.
I'm running for county executive because I have a vision that Frederick County will continue towards the path of prosperity, that we will provide housing for those that are trying to get a family here and get started, the middle class that are trying to pay down the debt and save for their kids, the seniors that want to retire here with their families and retire with dignity. I do what I say I do. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. Yes, I've been rough around the edges, maybe a bull in a china shop, and I know that I've got to change those ways. But I do follow through on my promises. When you look at who's endorsed me, I treat the county employees with respect. Every county bargaining agency that can endorse has endorsed me. The career firefighters, IFF, have endorsed me. The FOP, the deputies, have endorsed me. The correctional officers, FOP 102A, have endorsed me. Why has the overwhelming majority of the municipal leaders endorsed me? Because they know they can trust me. They know that they were treated with disrespect. They were suing the county double taxation with tax equity, other issues, petty issues like charging them $1 a parcel to send out their tax bill. I most recently received the endorsement of Right to Life and was told by the realtors that I'll be the only candidate that they make a financial contribution to. We both went to that forum and seek that. I don't have any special interest money. The only thing special about the money I've received is that they're scared to death that we're going to return back to the tax and spend ways under the previous board, that we'll return back to the anti-business ways. Pull my report. It's all public. Why are the overwhelming majority of businesses in Frederick County supporting me? Because we need to be open for business. We not only have to be the most business-friendly county in the state of Maryland, we have to be the most senior-friendly county in the state of Maryland. And that's why I work to continue to expand the senior property tax credit. I appreciate you being here tonight. I've always made myself available, whether it's been a forum like this or if you want to talk to me one-on-one. I've always given out my cell phone number, 301-748-3218. At times, while I may not have always agreed with the Frederick News-Post, I've never called up and complained about any of those articles. And in fairness, any time that the Frederick News-Post, I've called them and asked for space in their editorial page, they provided it for me to put my views out. So I appreciate you being here tonight, and I sincerely appreciate the fairness of the Frederick News-Post in putting on this forum. And again, it'll all be over in, what, 18, 19 days, and I think we're all looking forward to that. So thank you.
Jan, Blaine, thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate your time. Geordie, did you want to just make a final? All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We appreciate you being members of the News-Post.